All right, Cristoforo Colombo, Christopher Columbus. Spoke about him just a minute ago, 1492. Columbus, who was sailing for Spain, is going to take off on a mission trying to get to East Asia, right? His goal is to take a few ships and find a route going through the Pacific Ocean and getting to the Indian Ocean Trade Network, right? What is that? Basically, in the Indian Ocean, you have a trade being taken place between a number of different states, including India, China, states in Southeast Asia, East Africa, the Persian Gulf. There's a lot of trade going on there. There's a lot of wealth, luxury goods, spices is a big thing, silks, etc. And so you have Christian kingdoms who are trying to get a direct route to this area. They already have a direct route by this time, by around 1492 when Columbus sails. That route is going around the Cape of Good Hope at the bottom of Africa and going into the Indian Ocean area that way. But Columbus has this bright idea that if he sails into the Pacific, he can get there quicker, more efficient, and that'll be a better route than going all the way around Africa. And so that is Columbus's idea. But of course, he's going to fail. He's never going to actually make it to Asia. Instead, he makes it to islands in the Caribbean. And he is going to meet an indigenous people on one of these islands. He lands on an island called Guanahani, which he will rename San Salvador. And he will meet a people known as the Taínos, or Arawaks. And the Taínos are going to receive Columbus well. They treat him nicely. They're very kind to him and generous. They don't look exactly like Columbus, right? They're not dressed the same way. They're mostly nude. And they have very primitive weapons compared to Columbus and the people that are with him. And so basically, Columbus realizes that they are vulnerable and that they will be easy to enslave. And so he does. He enslaves about 500 of them, and he takes them back to Spain. And eventually, the Spanish will take over a number of islands in the Caribbean. And what are they going to do? They're going to set up sugar plantations. Okay, sugar plantations is the way that they will make money, try to make profit off of these islands, because they realize that there's not a lot of trade goods. They're not in Asia. There's no silk or spices or anything like that that they were hoping for. No, instead they're trying to figure out a way to profit from these islands. At first they try to mine for gold. But that is unsuccessful for the most part. I mean, there is some gold there, but not large amounts. That would really pay off. So sugar plantations is the way that the Spanish will try to make profit off of this land, all right? Because there's a huge demand for sugar in Europe, so if you can grow it, you would have a big market for it, and you could charge a lot for it and make a huge profit, okay? Now, after forcing the Taínos to work on these sugar plantations and to mine for gold, a lot of them will weaken and die, and you also have the spreading of disease going on in the Caribbean as well. For these two reasons, you're going to see a decline in the population of the Taínos, right? A huge, massive decline. Thousands will die. And so you're going to see that population go down. It doesn't completely disappear or go extinct, but there's definitely a decline in the population. So the Spanish, who do not do manual labor, that's something that they don't want to do, they want someone else to do it for them, they are going to bring in African slaves to do this work for them on the sugar plantations there in the Caribbean, right? So this is basically the Spanish Empire spreading to the Caribbean, sinking its roots in there and trying to make a profit off of that area. All right. Eventually, you're going to see a debate take place in Spain over the enslavement of Native Americans and whether it was right to enslave them or not. So you would have a couple of different Spanish individuals, one by the name of Las Casas, the other by the name of Sepulveda. These two individuals will be debating over this. And so Sepulveda, he is going to claim that Native Americans are naturally born slaves, right? That they are just naturally born inferior, and they should be the ones to work for the Spanish, and the Spanish shouldn't have to do manual labor because they are of a more evolved species, basically a better type of man, that doesn't have to do that kind of work, right? This is all coming from a theory going way back to the Greeks, a theory from Aristotle that claimed that some men were born to be slaves while others were born to live a life of virtue and not have to do manual labor. And so Sepulveda is going to make this argument when he's talking about Native Americans and their condition, right? That he's basically saying they're natural slaves, right? That's what they're born into. And so he's promoting the idea that they could be enslaved. Las Casas, on the other hand, is going to promote the idea that Native Americans are actually rational human beings, and they would be great converts to Christianity, right? So they could possibly be converted to Christianity, and they would be very devoted Christians from what he saw. Las Casas was a priest, but originally he was a slave owner himself. But after living in the Caribbean for a period of time and seeing all of the horrible things that happened to Native Americans, he decides to become a priest, and he tries to protect the Native Americans, right? Because he sees a huge amount of atrocities. He writes about it in a book. There's a number of different things that he describes, like the killing of babies, the raping of women, the murder of individuals, the overwork of Native Americans, which would cause them to die. And so he talks about these massive numbers that would lead to that depopulation I was talking about earlier, right? So Las Casas is basically saying we have to treat Native Americans with respect. We should not enslave them. They are human beings just like us. So you have this debate going back and forth. This is all taking place in Spain. Las Casas will go to Spain, and he'll debate Sepulveda there. Okay, and so ultimately this debate is never really resolved, but eventually the Spanish crown would outlaw the enslavement of Native Americans. A little bit about Spain, their social hierarchy. So of course on the top of the social hierarchy is going to be the ruling family, the king and his family. Beneath him you will have the nobility, and the nobility is basically your upper class individuals, and they are broken into two groups. You have your titled nobility. The title is basically referring to whether they are, you know, for example, say a count or a duke, right? These are noble titles that would be given to upper class individuals who would be fairly wealthy and own a large amount of land. Then you have your lower nobility, right? They're still in the upper class, but they're not titled, and they aren't quite that wealthy all the time, right? And so they don't have any title, but they have some social prestige, right? So people will look up to them, they'll be respected in society, but they may not actually be rich, right? Some of these untitled nobility will be known as hidalgos, right? So they have respect, but they don't actually have the funds, they don't have the money, okay? Below the nobility, you have the commoners. And so a lot of the commoners are just peasants who are basically serfs who work on the lands of the nobility, and the nobility basically takes care of them and has control over them. But you also have other types of commoners, such as different types of professionals, right, such as lawyers, artisans who work in crafts. You also have merchants, who sell various goods, right? So there's a number of different types of commoners in Spain as well, and they'll be on the lower end of the scale there of the social hierarchy. So this social hierarchy actually is pretty relevant to what is going on in the Americas at this time. How so? Well, around the time that Columbus is traveling to the Americas, Spain is experiencing economic downturn, meaning that their economy is contracting. There's not a lot of jobs and opportunity, there's not a lot of wealth circulating in their economy. So you have individuals like the untitled nobility, the hidalgos, and the commoners who are trying to find a way to have some type of social prestige or wealth. Okay, now once Columbus finds the Americas, this gives an opportunity to the untitled nobility and the commoners to come to the Americas, and they could gain prestige by going to war, you know, conquering new lands of the Native Americans, and also maybe they could gain some wealth. Right? Maybe they could start a sugar plantation or farming or some other type of activity there in the Americas that would bring wealth to them. Okay, so this is going to entice some of the untitled nobility and the commoners to want to come to the Americas to seek their fortune. All right. So Columbus never realized that he did not make it to Asia. He thought that he was on some islands off the coast of southern China. Eventually, though, the Spanish will realize that the Caribbean is not Asia and that it is a whole new area. And so they will set up their government administration first on the island of Hispaniola, and eventually they would also gain control of the large island of Cuba. Now, the governor of Cuba, Diego Velázquez, is going to send a couple of expeditions to try to find more wealth or trading partners, right? He's going to try to see if he could find any larger civilizations in the area so that he could trade with them, or he's also looking for slaves as the native population continues to depopulate in the Caribbean. So Velázquez is going to send a couple of expeditions looking for trade, slaves, and wealth. The first of these expeditions is going to be led by a man named Francisco Hernandez de Cordoba. All right, and Hernandez is basically going to take some ships, and he is going to discover the Yucatan Peninsula. All right, now he discovers it like from the Spanish perspective, but of course there are people already living there, right? All right, so Hernandez is going to lead some ships. He discovers the Yucatan. He hears that there's rumors of even more gold farther inland, right? So now this is going to gain the Spanish interest, right? So they're going to want to have more expeditions. And Hernandez's group is also going to get into a little scuffle with some of the people that he meets there in the Yucatan, and in that 50 Spaniards will be killed, right? And so the Spanish are going to leave from the Yucatan after that, and they're going to go back to Cuba, and Hernandez will tell Governor Velázquez what he found. All right, because basically the Spanish, like I said, they're trying to find more areas of wealth because they're trying to make a profit off of these new discoveries, right? So they're either trying to find gold, or they're trying to find civilizations that they could trade with, or they're trying to find slaves to work on their sugar plantations in the Caribbean. All right, and so they reached the Yucatan. A second expedition is going to be sent out by Governor Velázquez of Cuba, and this is going to be an expedition led by Juan de Grijalva. And Grijalva is also going to go to the area around the Yucatan, and he is going to return with a little bit of gold, right? And every time the Spanish find some more gold, this is going to encourage them to lead more and more expeditions to try to find a huge amount of gold, right? They're trying to strike it rich. Okay, so the Grijalva expedition is going to be somewhat successful in the sense that they find some gold, and they're also going to hear rumors of a large civilization, an empire that is further inland, and that is going to be rumors about the Aztec Empire, right? So this is the first time that the Spanish are finally learning that the Aztec Empire exists, and this is a big deal, right? Because if you could trade with this empire, that could be good, right? Maybe you could gain some profit that way, or maybe you could conquer this empire. We'll see. That is eventually going to happen, though.